To have Kim Wheeler back with us. She's had COVID at home and this and that, and she's able to be back today. Kim and I claim a kinship. Her sister is married to my nephew, so that ought to make us kin in some way. We're delighted to have her back with us. Good to have all of you. We're in a study of love and marriage, and the topic today is how to stay married and like it. Now, if you're going to stay married, it'd be better to like it, wouldn't it? That makes sense. And that's the purpose of our lesson today. Somewhere I ran across this article. A dietitian was addressing a large audience in Chicago. She said the material we put into our stomachs is enough to have killed most of us sitting here years ago. She talked about the dangers of red meat and Chinese food and various things. And she asked this question: can anyone tell me what food it is that causes the most grief and suffering for years after eating it? And a 75-year-old man sitting down front stood and said, I can tell you, it's wedding cake. There might be a lot of truth in that. But you know, there are many homes like that. Husbands and wives live together, and sometimes they live a long time together, but they don't like it. I read some time ago about a village down in South America built on a mountainside, on a cliff, and people were always falling over the cliff, breaking arms and legs, and sometimes people were killed by doing that. And the city council met to decide what to do about that problem. They decided to build a hospital down there at the bottom of the cliff. That's a little bit too late, isn't it? It'd be better to do something up here on top of the cliff to keep people from falling over the cliff. And that's what we're trying to do in this series of lessons. We're trying to prepare people for marriage and trying to give some thoughts that might help them have a better marriage so they can stay married and like it all the way. There are some families that stay together. Some are married 25 years or more, and some are miserable. And that's because some people have been willing to work at it and do something up here on top of the cliff to keep people from falling over and hurting and divorcing. You know, when people divorce, it's about like a shootout between Siamese twins. Have you ever seen any Siamese twins in person? I have. Only one time in my life. When I was a boy down in Winter Garden, Florida, I was in the drugstore one day and two young ladies came in, and I noticed they were hooked together at the hips. Everywhere one went, the other one went. Whatever happens to one happens to the other. Suppose one of those ladies got into a fuss with her sister and shot her to death. What would it do to the other one? You see, whatever happens to one happens to the other. That's the way it is in a marriage. When people get a divorce, it didn't just hurt one of them, it hurt both of them. That's the way it works. And so we need to try to stay together, but like it all the way. I told you this story. Don't stop me. I want to hear it again, though. There was this 90-year-old woman who went to the lawyer and said, I want to get a divorce from my husband. He said, Millie, you're 90 years old. You've been married 70 years. Why do you want to get a divorce now? She said, enough is enough. And there are marriages like that. Some may stay together a long time, but they don't like it. Wouldn't it be better to stay together and like it all the way? And I hope that we can do some things during this quarter to help us stay together and like it. It's a tough relationship. And it is tough to stick it out. It is not easy. But that's God's will. We must do it because that's God's will for us. And it's a tribute to men and women who are willing to stay together and work at it and make it what it ought to be. And in Matthew 19, you remember that some Pharisees came to Jesus and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause or any cause? That's what they really meant. But Jesus told them that that is not what it ought to be. They ought to stay together until death. In this context, Jesus teaches, what therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. And they referred back to Moses, and Jesus said, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And in verse 9 he said, and I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away, doth commit adultery. So the will of God is that husbands and wives stay together until death. We must recognize the fact that when a man and woman say until death in the marriage ceremony, that's what it means, until death. Now, it's rooted in the feeling that they have for each other. They love each other. And that love ought to cause them to stay together until death. It is not like a fragile flower that blooms only in the springtime like azaleas, but this love is something that lasts all year long, and this marriage ought to stand like a great oak tree that stands through all the storms of life, through all the seasons of the year. They stay together regardless. We want to stay together and like it. She says, when they get married, I, John, take thee, Mary, to be my lawful wife until death do us part. She says, I, Mary, take thee, John, to be my lawful wedded husband until death do us part. That's what they say when they get married, and that's what it ought to mean. It means permanence in marriage. It's the only basis for the ongoing of society. When the foundation of a society crumbles, then that society cannot stand for long. We've talked about the Roman Empire. That was one of the greatest worldwide empires the world had ever known, but it fell. Joseph Gibbons wrote the monumental book, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, and he tells about some reasons for the fall of that empire. And if I gave you those reasons right now, you would say, that sounds just like America. And that'd be correct. Correct. Sounds just like America today. If the Roman Empire, the greatest worldwide empire the world had ever known, fell for those reasons, what's going to happen to America? And it all revolves around marriage. One of the reasons that empire fell was the fact that people began to just divorce for any reason, and the home fell apart. And so that foundation for that society also allowed the society to fall and be destroyed as well. Now, we have to realize that when we get married, it's not just until we get tired of each other, but it is until death do us part. Every major situation in a society like ours depends upon the permanence of the foundation, and that's marriage. And if the foundation crumbles, then that which is built upon it will also crumble. But we must recognize the fact that permanence in marriage is not all that's needed. Permanence in marriage does not necessarily bring happiness. You know, you can be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and that would be a permanent arrangement, but it would not be a good, happy arrangement. And so marriage can be like that. It can be boredom insufferable. It can be confinement that is not endurable. You remember that old man and his wife who were sitting on the porch rocking many years ago before television took over? You know, people used to sit on the porch and rock. I see a lot of rockers, that's what I'm trying to think of, on porches now, but I don't see many people sitting around in those rockers. Scott's the only one I see. He has rockers on his porch, and he likes to study sitting in one of those rockers. We don't see many people using those rockers anymore. Back then we did. There's some people who don't have the consequences that those people had. This couple was sitting there in silence, and she said, I bet you don't know what day this is. He said, I do too, it's Thursday. She said, no, I mean, this is our 50th wedding anniversary. Don't you think we ought to kill a hog and celebrate? He said, I don't think we ought to make some hog suffer for something we did 50 years ago. There are marriages like that. They may stay together 50 years, but they don't enjoy it. They don't like it. I conducted a funeral one morning about 11 o'clock, and our educational director led the singing for it. And by the time we got through at the church building, it was about noon, and we were riding with the funeral director out to the funeral place where they were to be buried in the cemetery. And one of us mentioned that we were hungry. And the funeral director said, if you guys will go with me, I'll treat you to a steak lunch after we get through. Preachers don't turn down many opportunities like that, so we went with him. And we had an unusual experience with him telling us about a number of things that he had seen in his work as an undertaker. Now, some of the things will make some of your hair fall out. I see some of you already heard them, so I won't tell you all of them. But he said there was a man who died, and his wife wanted him to be cremated. So they did it. He called his wife and told her when it was done. And she said, will you bring the urn out to me? He said, I'll be glad to. He took him out there. She met him at the door and said, let me show you where I want you to scatter out his ashes. And she led him out to the driveway and said, I want you to scatter his ashes on the driveway between the road and the garage. He did it. And she said, I bet you're wondering why I asked you to do that. He said, yes. She said, that rascal ran over me all of his life, and now I'm going to run over him the rest of my life. There are many marriages like that. But there's no joy, no happy anticipation, no happiness at all in that marriage. God intended for the marriage to deepen and enrich the lives of the man and the woman. It's somewhat like two rivers that come together. Two rivers can flow together and form one, but there may be the dashing of the waves, the water may be a little bit rough, but go downstream a mile or two and the waters will have become calm and serene. It ought to be that way in a marriage. Two lives come together to form one. There may be the dashing of the waves. The water may be a little bit rough right there, but go downstream a year or two and it should have become calm and serene. No rough waters, no dashing of the waves. That's the way God intended for a marriage to be. And if you're wise at all, you want your marriage to be that way. You must realize that there are things that will help a marriage be what we want it to be, what God wants it to be. There are some who get married for physical reasons only. That's the only thing they're interested in. But if you're wise at all, you know that kindness and goodness and tenderness, understanding, integrity, honor, these principles that are taught in Christianity are to be found in that marriage. Those are the things in which we need to be interested, not just the physical side of marriage. So I'd like to give you 5 commandments to help you stay together and enjoy and like it. Number 1, thou shalt pay for it gladly. That means it's going to be expensive to have a good marriage, and you're going to have to be willing to pay the price to have a good marriage. It's not an accident that some of these couples are living together after 50 and 60 years, but it's because they've been willing to pay the price to have a good marriage in most cases. Some are willing to pay the price to weed out those things that pull them apart. They get rid of those things that keep them from being one in marriage. And so that each year is better than the year before. I appreciate those men and women who work on their marriages to make them what they ought to be. There was a husband running late for work one morning. He came through the kitchen. His wife was sitting there drinking a cup of coffee and asked him what he wanted for breakfast. He said, I'm running late. I need to rush, so I won't have time to eat. She said, I bet you don't know what day this is. Husbands don't like to admit that they've forgotten their wife's birthday or anniversary date. He said as he went out, I do too. About 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When she went to the door, there was a delivery man with a dozen red roses for her. And that really thrilled her. Then about 12 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. When she went to the door, there was a delivery man bringing a 2-pound box of her favorite chocolates. That thrilled her even more. About 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. She went to the door, and there was a delivery woman bringing a beautiful designer dress from the local boutique. She couldn't wait for her husband to get home. When he came in that evening, she said, this has been a wonderful day. First, the beautiful flowers, and then those chocolates, and then that beautiful dress. This has been the best Groundhog Day that I have ever experienced. You see, he was trying, though he didn't remember which day it was. And it's good when men are willing to do that, even if they make a mistake like that. It is good to work at it to try to have the kind of marriage that you want to have. You know, a couple can overcome that and really love each other. There was one couple that was having a fuss. I mean, they were getting mad and louder at each other. And the phone rang. You know, they've been yelling at each other madder than a wet setting hen. And one of them will pick up the phone and say, in a sweet voice, hello. Just like that, they can change when they've been fussing and fighting, you see. If we want to change things for the better, we can. You know how you talk to your dog is more important than what you say to him. You may say to that dog, you are a beautiful, wonderful, registered hound dog, but if you say it in a loud, gruff way, he'll run from you. But if you say to him, you are an ugly, mean, wonderful hound dog, but mean, and you say it in a real kind way, he'll stand there and wag his tail at you. It depends on what you say to him and how you say it to him, and that's true with husbands and wives. If we want to stay together and be happy in it, enjoy it, then we learn to talk to each other in kindness and love. When you make your vows, when you get married, that's what you're saying. You're saying we're going to work at it, we're going to stay together, and we're going to be kind with each other. I remember a Friday afternoon when a young man came to see me when I was preaching for the Avondale Church in Atlanta. This young man and his wife were members in the congregation there, and he came by and told me we were going to get a divorce. The divorce is coming up in court on Monday. This is Friday afternoon. And he came to me and wanted me to help them save their marriage. I didn't even have time to talk to him that weekend, much less help them save that marriage. They hadn't been working at it. They had been involved in drugs and all that, and I didn't know all of that, and I didn't know they were having trouble in the marriage. If we are having trouble, we need to talk to someone who may be able to help us. You can't wait until the divorce proceedings are coming up in court to do anything about it. So you'll have to work on it beforehand. When you consider the full price of marriage, including that of parenthood, you realize that there isn't anything except Christianity that makes so many demands of you and requires so much effort on your part. Now, to be a Christian, it requires a lot of time and sacrifice and effort on your part and willingness to overcome weaknesses and whatever. But, you know, marriage does the same thing. Marriage requires a great deal of effort and work on our part and sacrifice on our part in order to have a good marriage. It's expensive to have a good marriage. One man says his wife's motto is, if the shoe fits, charge it. All of us have had that experience. One man said, I asked my girl for her hand in marriage, and it's been in my pocket ever since. We understand it's expensive to be married and stay married. And those who shop for bargain marriages in the basement are going to come out with shoddy goods that you're not going to be happy with tomorrow. You'll have to pay the full price for a good marriage. You can't say, I'm going to get me a marriage and I'm not going to make any sacrifices or do any work. I'm just going to get married. Well, you're going to come out with shoddy goods that way. Now, you can go to a department store on the upper floors where they put out new stuff each month or whenever. But after a number of people have handled those clothes and buttons are off and this and that, and they put them down in the bargain basement, and you can buy them at a cheaper price. Now, you can find a marriage down in the bargain basement, but you won't be happy with it. You need to be able to find someone to marry and pay the full price, sacrifice, and work in order to make that marriage work. So you have to be willing to put forth that effort to have the right kind of marriage. Marriage is expensive, but I want to ask you something. What else in life besides Christianity will bring you the greatest joy and peace that you can enjoy on earth? Other than Christianity, it's a good marriage. And so it's worth whatever sacrifice you make, all the work you put forth into it. Number 2, thou shalt be content. In Philippians 4, verse 11, Paul said, I have learned in whatsoever things I am to be content. Paul had learned contentment. When he set out on those missionary journeys, he knew that he'd be suffering in various ways, and he did. He knew it would cost him a great deal in safety and other ways, but he was depending upon God's grace. Now, if Paul found God's grace sufficient to help him to be content, then we ought to find God's grace sufficient to help us be content in our marriages. Not everyone who dives into the sea of matrimony comes up with a pearl. Now, you might marry someone and then find out after marriage it was a wrong one. But you're into it, you're married, and so the answer is not to divorce, but to make that marriage what it ought to be. Contentment is more a matter of how you live, the circumstances, than other things. How you do it, your attitude in it, will determine whether you're content or not the circumstances. Contentment comes out of the thinking of a person. Solomon said in Proverbs 23, verse 7, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. If we want to be content, we have to make up our minds to be content. We marry somebody, and then we find out some things we didn't know, and we would rather be married to somebody else. We can't do that according to God's will. We just have to learn to be content. Contentment is more a matter of how we make up our mind than how we make up our face. A man may see a woman, and she's put on her war paint and all those things, and really is beautiful. And he may say, you know, I'd like to be married to her. But you can marry someone like that, and unless you are willing to be content, you may find some things you don't like, but you have to go ahead and be content anyway. It might be a pleasure to be married to a woman who had the beauty of Miss America, who had the lovely, sweet disposition of an angel, who was as concerned about my well-being as Florence Nightingale, and who had the ability to cook of a French chef. But if you married someone like that, you could still find some things to be unhappy about, discontented with. You just have to make up your mind to be content with the one you married. I don't know what type of man you ladies might want to marry or have wanted to marry, but I do know if you married someone like that who fits your ideal, you could still be unhappy. You might have said, now, I'd like to be married to someone who looks like Tom Cruise, good-looking actor. I'd like to marry someone who has the fame like Michael Jordan has as the greatest basketball player. I'd like to marry someone who has the money of Elon Musk, over $400 billion. But suppose you married someone that fit that bill, you could still be unhappy. After you get married, you may see some things that you didn't see beforehand, and you might be unhappy, even if they met that criteria you set. But you just have to learn to be content. Contentment in marriage does not come out of perfection of people or perfection of circumstances. Contentment comes out of your mind. You have to determine that you're going to be content and stay married, and you can be happy then. Years ago, I heard about a man who was visiting a mental institution. He was going to have a little tour, and a nurse was showing him around, giving him the 50-cent tour. As they were going down the hall, he heard some man saying, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. He looked into a room, and the man was sitting there with his head in his hands and crying, oh, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. He asked the nurse, what happened to him? She said, well, he was in love with a woman named Lucy. She jilted him and married some other man and drove him out of his mind. They went on down the hall. On the other end of the hall, he heard somebody saying, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. He looked into the room, and there was a man sitting there with his head in his hands, crying, oh, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. And this man visiting said to the nurse, this Lucy must have been quite a gal. And she said, you don't understand. This is one who got Lucy. The first one was driven out of his mind because he didn't get her, and the second one was driven out of his mind because he got her. You see, it's not the circumstances that determine whether we are content or not. It's whether we make up our minds to be content. $1 million cannot buy that contentment. Miss America can't deliver it. A Mercedes cannot convey it. Perfect health cannot guarantee it. And a utopia, a perfect situation, cannot promise it. But you can do it if you make up your mind to be content. I heard about one man and woman who were going to get married, and they didn't want to have a church wedding. They went to a justice of the peace. And the justice of the peace simply went through the ceremony, didn't prepare them at all. And he was saying to the wife, do you promise to take this man to be your lawful wedded husband, for better, for worse? She said, wait a minute, what'd you say? Do you promise to take this man to be your lawful wedded husband, for better, for worse? She said, well, he's not going to get any better, and he couldn't be any worse, so I'll just take him as he is. Now, I don't know if somebody would really do that, but that would be a good attitude. I'll just take him as he is. Was it Ben Franklin who said, before you get married, keep both eyes open? And that's good advice. You can see what you're getting. And then he said, after marriage, keep one of them closed. That's pretty good advice. You need to see what you're getting into before you make the decision to marry. But after you marry, you need to close one of the eyes, because you're going to see some things you didn't see beforehand. And you just have to learn to be content. The contented man is the one who counts his blessings that he can praise, and not the flaws that he can emphasize. We need to be looking for blessings that we are enjoying, and not for flaws or failures. Contentment grows out of our own thinking. Don't expect perfection when you get married. Some man said, I was looking for the perfect girl, and when I found her, she was looking for the perfect boy. You still miss out, see? You just have to learn to be content. Now, we can spend a lot of time on all these, but our time is limited, so I'm just going to move on very quickly. Learn to be content. Number 3, thou shalt be honest with one another. That's honesty throughout your marriage. You have to be open and honest with each other. There was a business office that had a Christmas party one time, and there was a lot of drinking. It was a worldly party, and they had a lot of drinking, and the boss saw that his secretary was really guzzling down the booze. And by the time the party was over, she was as drunk as a coot. And he thought, she doesn't need to be driving home. So he volunteered to just drive her home for safety. It was just an innocent thing. He drove her home, didn't even get out of the car. She got out, went in, and he went on home, and he said, I don't think I'll tell my wife that I have driven this woman home. She might be jealous. So he didn't say anything about it. He went in. As soon as he walked in the door, she said, let's go eat out. He turned around, they went out to the car, was driving to the restaurant, and this man looked down, and he saw a woman's shoe about halfway under the passenger seat. He thought, now, if my wife sees that, she may think I'm fooling around with another woman. I better do something. So when he caught her looking out the side, he rolled down his window, grabbed that shoe and threw it out the window, raised the window. When they got to the restaurant, she began to move her feet around and said, where in the world did my other shoe go? Now, I don't know how he got out of that one, but I know how he got into it. He was keeping a secret from her, and it was an innocent thing, and if he had just told her the circumstances, there'd been no problem. But when he got rid of that shoe, that indicated there was something going on. And so he was not being honest with her. We have to be honest in our marriages if we're going to stay together and like it. Of course, there's no need to argue about the honesty of thou shalt not commit adultery. If one commits adultery, that one is not being honest with the marriage partner. They promise to keep themselves to that one until death. And if they commit adultery, they're not being honest with their marriage partner. No marriage can be built upon mutual love and respect if this fundamental relationship is violated. They must be honest with one another. I told you the story of this young man who liked to go to the clubs at night and drink and dance with other women. His wife was a Christian and he wouldn't do it. And he came in one night drunk with lipstick on his collar, and she knew that he had been unfaithful to her to an extent, at any rate. And when she came to see me the next morning, she said, I'll forgive him, but I don't know if I can ever trust him again or not. See, that's the point. She could forgive him, she thinks, but the relationship will never be the same. She didn't know if she'd ever be able to trust him again or not. Thou shalt be honest with thy mate. We need to be honest in other ways. What about the woman who during the days of courtship gives the impression of being a warm and tender and affectionate companion, and she wants to get married? She's grown. She understands everything involved in marriage. And so they got married. But then she becomes like a porcupine maybe and will not allow her husband to fulfill that need in marriage. When I was preaching for the Avondale Church in Atlanta, we had a young lady there who was a fine Christian young lady, but she was not married. And a man had met her and began to come to the services with her. And it looked like this thing was going to end up in marriage. And so I asked this man if I could study with him and help him to understand why she is a member of the New Testament church. He agreed. I studied with him over a number of weeks. He began to see what the Bible teaches about being a Christian and being faithful in marriage and all these things. Then he said, I need to talk to you and tell you about my background. He said, I was living in Chicago, and I was going with this lady, and we decided to get married, and we did. At the end of the wedding ceremony, he said, we went directly to the airport, boarded a plane, went to Hawaii on our honeymoon. But he said after we got to Hawaii, she would not allow me to consummate the marriage in the physical relationship. She just would not allow it. She had known what marriage involved and all of these things, but she would not allow it. He said we flew back to Chicago, and he said I had the marriage annulled. Moved to Atlanta. He met this girl who was a Christian. Now he wonders, do I have a right to marry her? You see, that first woman that he married was not honest. She gave one impression during courtship, another impression after courtship, and did not fulfill her responsibility. She was not honest. What about the man who, during the days of courtship, gives one impression to the lady? He makes her think he was kind and good and considerate and loving. And then after they get married, he's not like that at all. When I was preaching for Concord Street down in Orlando, Florida, we had a lady there who was not married, a young lady, but she was a Christian, and a young man had met her and began to attend the services with her, and they decided to get married. And that young man said to her, if it means your complete happiness, I will attend the Church of Christ with you. She believed him, got married, and then he wouldn't go to church with her anymore. He was not honest with her. She wrote me a letter and poured out her heart to me. Still have that letter. She said, I'm afraid that we're going to lose our marriage over this. And did, because he was not honest with her. Before marriage, he said, I'll go to the Church of Christ with you. After they married, he wouldn't do it. And so honesty means we're going to be honest with them all the way, in every way. If we're dishonest with the person we marry, that marriage is not going to make it. Love needs honesty. Not the nitpicking honesty that says, I'm going to be honest with you, you got a wart on the back of your head. She may say, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like the way you comb your hair. I'm not talking about that kind of honesty. I'm talking about the deeper honesty of the heart in which you are open and honest with each other, sharing what is genuine in your lives, imperfections and all. You have to be honest with each other if you're going to stay together and like it all the way. I can tell you from my experience in marriage counseling with people, if you're not honest, you might as well hang it up. You have to be honest with each other. Number 4, thou shalt learn to love one another. And I left a lot of room on that sheet you got, so you'd have room to write down whatever you think or questions or scriptures. Hopefully you'll do that. Thou shalt learn to love one another. There's a lot about love that the songwriters are not teaching you. There's a lot about love that the people in Hollywood are not telling you. They're usually not talking about love. They're talking about the physical relationship in marriage. And that can be done without love at all. There's much more to love than that which you experience on your wedding night, as thrilling and as glorious as that is. It is a beautiful arrangement in marriage. It came from God. God placed those needs and desires in men and women. And God said, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make him an help meet for him. That means a help suitable to his needs. He met the needs that were not present in the woman. God made them that way. And God intended that that physical relationship should be a part of marriage, a part of the blessings of marriage. And in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13, or 13 verse 4, the Bible says, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. God placed that physical side of marriage within marriage, and it's a beautiful relationship in marriage. It is of God, nothing wrong with it whatsoever in marriage. But it's a very small part of marriage. In another lesson, I was pointing out the fact that that relationship is not enough to make a good marriage and keep a marriage going. I can tell you about some who engaged in that aspect of marriage, but they're still divorced. I told you about the lady that I counseled with. She didn't come to get me to help her save her marriage. She had her mind made up. She'd already paid down $400 deposit on an apartment to rent. She was not going to change. And yet she said that physical part of marriage was the only thing that was good about their marriage. She said it's good. But that is not enough to hold the two together, to make a great marriage. And so we need to understand that we must love each other. And if to love each other, then when they engage in the physical part of marriage, it's an expression of their love for each other. But there must be more to that than love, more to love than that, if we're going to stay together and like all of it through the years. If there was not more to love than that, we cannot stay together. We talked about Hollywood. If the physical relationship was all there is involved in marriage, then Hollywood would be the happiest place in America. But it's not. They have more divorces per capita than any other place in America. They have more suicides per capita in Hollywood than in any other place in America. You know, if the physical relationship was all that's involved in love, that'd be the happiest place. But that doesn't make it the happiest place. They change marriage partners there about as often as you change your clothes. We talked about Liz Taylor, who'd been married 9 times. Mickey Rooney, who'd been married 8 times. And that's pretty general in Hollywood. So you see, the physical side of marriage is a part of marriage. Beautiful arrangement in marriage. But it is not enough to hold a couple together if they don't really love each other. We need the kind of love that Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7. And if we have time here, I want to read that from a modern translation in a few moments. This is the kind of love that through the years brings peace and joy to a husband and wife. If you really love each other. If you don't really love each other, don't get married. If you are married, you have to work on really loving each other. And then number 5, thou shalt share a common dedication to God. I don't know of anything more important than that. When we complete this quarter, I will have presented 13 lessons on love and marriage. We will have made a number of suggestions to help us have the right kind of marriage. But I don't know of anything more important than this one. Thou shalt share a common dedication to God. In all the world, there is nothing that will give greater security and protection to your marriage and guarantee its happiness more than a common dedication to God. If the husband and wife are really committed to God, then they can have a good marriage, they can stay together and like it. I'm not just talking about coming to worship services together. They'll do that if they're committed to God. A husband and wife who are committed to God will want to worship God. They'll be here in Bible class on Sunday mornings. They'll be in the worship service. They'll be back on Sunday night to worship God. When the church meets, they'll be back on Wednesday nights. If they're really devoted to God, they won't let little things keep them from worshiping God. But there's more to it than that. You have to learn from God, what love is. When you find men and women who are dedicated to God, you're going to find good marriages because they've learned what love is from God. In Philippians 4:19, Paul said that we learn love from God. We love Him because He first loved us. We learn what love is from God. And when we have that kind of love for each other, we'll stay together and like all of it. Your greatest need of all is God. He can purify your affections. He can teach you tenderness and thoughtfulness, understanding and patience. These are Christian principles, and you learn those from God. You don't learn them from men. And when we learn those Christian principles, we'll make a good marriage partner. He can give you high and noble principles by which you can live and form your life. Now, if you go by what man says, you can swap partners, have as many partners as you wish. You can drink, gamble. Man says you can do what you want to do. But love for God says we want to do what God wants us to do. When we have that kind of love, we'll have a good marriage and we'll stay together. I may speak to some today who might need to think about that and work on it. All of us need to think about it. We've given 5 principles, I believe biblical principles, and experience shows that they are true. I hope we will do everything we can to put those principles into practice in our lives, and we can have a good marriage. Let me read from 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7, where Paul gives the description of love, the meaning of love, and see if this is true in your marriage. This love of which I speak is slow to lose patience. It looks for a way of being constructive. It is not possessive. It is neither anxious to impress, nor does it cherish inflated ideas of its own importance. Love has good manners and does not pursue selfish advantage. It is not touchy. It does not keep account of evil or gloat over the wickedness of other people. On the contrary, it is glad with all good men when truth prevails. Love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, no fading of its hope. It can outlast anything. It is, in fact, the one thing that still stands when all else has fallen. I believe that's the answer to it. If we really love each other, it's because we love God. He teaches us what love is. Let's do everything we can to get closer together to our mate. It is possible to stay married and like it. Now, this quarter I've not been giving you an opportunity to say anything. I couldn't do it and get all the information before you that I want to get before you. But if you have any questions you'd like for me to deal with, you may write them down and give them to me, and I'll pass them on to Scott and David, and they can answer them later. Be glad to try to answer any question that you might have. I appreciate the fact that you've been here, you've listened well, you've been a good audience. Thank you for being here.